Why can't we recycle plastic in the same way we do for metal? Melt it and remold it. Well, for one, polymers degrade when melted, so you can't just turn a PET water bottle into a new PET water bottle. It won't have the same properties anymore. You can use post-consumer recycled PET in something else, like a CPET microwave dinner tray, but even then you can't just use all of it, you can only use a small percentage of it. Edit, that something else can, in fact, be a new bottle, but it will almost certainly be mixed with virgin material and won't be 100% recycled. For 2, you can't mix types of plastics, which means that either consumers have to be exceptional at separating their types of plastic, by which I mean the cap and ring on your water bottle has to be separated since they're probably PP while the bottle itself is PET, or we have to have people sort through garbage bags full of recycling to separate it, which adds a hell of a lot to the cost. There's also the fact that most plastics have some additives in them, for one reason or another, and plastics with certain additives can't be mixed with others. For 3, any contaminants, adhesives from stickers, residue from food or drink, etc., have to be washed off to the point where they're as close to completely gone as possible, which is basically impossible and also adds a ton of labor, again increasing the cost dramatically. This is also true for paper cardboard. Stop recycling your greasy pizza boxes, they can't be recycled if there's food or grease stuck to hear them. Edit, this may not be true, I'm not sure. My city explicitly says not to recycle pizza boxes with grease on them, but YMMV. Maybe someone with more experience in recycling, or paper cardboard, can chime in on this one. For 4, not all plastics are thermoplastics. Thermosetting polymers cannot be melted down, they'll just burn up and release a ton of pollutants into the air. And obviously you can't mix thermoplastic polymers and thermosetting polymers. And for 5, it's largely just not feasible to use post-consumer recycled plastics because it's 1, extremely expensive to buy and 2, can be extremely difficult to work into your existing process while maintaining quality and matching the needed performance without using so little that it's basically irrelevant. You're paying through the nose to use a tiny amount of the stuff you bought, just to be able to put a label on your product that says contains post-consumer recycled material. Basically, plastic recycling, while it is done to some extent, is much more limited than the public has been led to believe, and in an amount of cases that would shock the average person, is outright impossible. I guarantee that 80–90% of the plastic items people put in their recycling bin actually end up in a landfill or incinerated because they can't actually be recycled for a myriad of reasons. Source: I work in QA at a plastics manufacturer. Shit, I've been saying this for 10 years. After a court ordered me to do community service at a recycling center after some teenage shenanigans. Guess what happened to the vast majority of the recyclable plastic? Yep. Straight into the garbage. You really think people are going to rinse the bottles for you, peel the labels, scrape the coffee grounds or whatever out of them? Hell no. They hit them off the conveyor belt with a stick and straight into the dumpster they go. Edit, guys, I'm not a recycling savant. I'm an engineer and my work has nothing to do with recycling. This was just my experience 10+ years ago doing community service to avoid a felony rap. I can't tell you exactly what to do or how recycling works in your area. All I can say is that yes, it's definitely not what most people think it is, and that if you care you should dig into it and find out how it works in your city. Call up your recycling center, I'm sure they'll be happy to tell you. Plastic processing engineer here. Plastic parts can be ground and reused, regrind, but options for doing so are limited. Plastic has a heat history. The more you melt and reheat plastic, the more it degrades. As the plastic degrades, you lose its physical properties. This means you have to use virgin material, no regrind, for many applications, such as automotive or medical parts. Regrind also can be more difficult to process, as it is more prone to part defects. Visible burns in the final product or brittleness would be a few examples. Regrind typically needs to be mixed with virgin material during processing to avoid these defects. The size of the regrind also matters. With virgin material, the plastic comes in little plastic pellets, all the same size. When these are melted down, they all melt at relatively the same time. With regrind, you get bigger chunks and dust. The dust tends to burn while the bigger chunks may not melt evenly. There is equipment to remove dust and more evenly chop parts, but then there is now additional cost to reusing materials. Then you get into contamination issues. Typically when doing regrind you don't reuse consumer products, instead you are taking the scrap at the plant and regrinding it there. Even keeping it at the plant level, the chances for contamination is high. If a part is dropped on the floor and picks up dirt, now it's in your regrind. There are many different types of plastic and each may require different processing temperatures. In many cases you cannot even mix different grades of the same material. I may have 5 different types of polypropylene at the plant, each with different fillers or additives that should not be mixed. This creates a logistical problem at the plant, because now you need 5 different grinders and 5 different storage containers for your materials. All it takes is one person putting the wrong part in the wrong bin or grinder and now you have a lot of scrap. Taking this a step further, this contamination could create machine damage in some cases. Incompatible materials such as polycarbonate melts at around 400 F, and polypropylene melts around 300 F, mixed together could chew up your machines by running unmelted material through. Mixing materials such as PVC and acetyl can create explosive chemical reactions. Many common plastics are thermoplastics and can be remelted. There is another group of materials called Thermoset. These materials undergo a chemical reaction to harden them. Example: epoxy. These materials cannot be reverted back to their original form and recycled. Some plastics can be reused, but process problems and costs make reusing plastics infeasible in many cases. Not all plastic melts. Thermoplastic ones melt when heated, but thermosetting ones are made strong by complicated bonds that don't break down with heat. They will catch fire first. This is a partial answer, naturally. And thermoplastics can usually be remolded a couple of times before the polymer chains degrade too far and the properties they were valued for, optical clarity, waterproof, become harder to achieve. Plastic recycling can be done with a few plastics, especially when you're changing form to a lower quality, like making bottles into plastic bags, but overall, it's a greenwashing scam that was put forth by the plastic companies to ensure their products would happily remain in production and everyone could feel great about it. Most of the plastics you use daily will not be recycled, cannot be recycled. Even if you toss it in the green bin. Sorry. Have you ever tried unbaking a pie? Had to scroll too far for an answer for a 5-year-old. I was going to suggest it's like turning a cookie into a brownie. Same or similar basic ingredients, but once made can't be unmade or changed. This is a great question and one that more people should be asking. It starts with the fact that not all plastics are the same, there's all types that can't be mixed together. So first off, we need a better recycling system. For instance, one where you would get money for the plastic waste you turn in. Like you get money for metals you recycle. Another thing is that with metals, because of the price difference, it is neatly sorted. You'll get a lot more money for copper than for mild steel, for instance. Now, to be able to do this, we should get better at identifying plastics. You could start by learning how to identify the different types by looking at the recycling triangles. They should be on every plastic part you have and they can help you hide the plastic. Now, you should also know that not all types of plastic are easily or even cleanly recyclable. But for the ones that are, yes, we could melt them and remold them, but, like you couldn't melt copper and steel together, you cannot melt HDPE and PA together. If you're interested in all of this, be sure to check out Dave Hackins and the project Precious Plastic. 2 large issues. There is no such material as plastic. There are a gazillion different types of plastic, just like how there are a lot of types of metal. So you have to work recycling out for every type individually. And not mix multiple types together. Just like with metals, mixing random stuff together makes reusing it borderline impossible. Plastics are far too cheap to make. They are made from ludicrously cheap fossil fuel stuff. Due to this, it's simply not economical to recycle it. That's an unavoidable issue, even if you want to be environmentally conscious with your company. As the company that uses non-recycled stuff can do its thing for cheaper, price better, and drive you into bankruptcy. Both issues can only, realistically, be solved by legislation. On top of these, there are technological hurdles. Stuff like plastics being made out of long chain-like molecules, instead of just atoms thrown in randomly. And with repeated reuse, molecular chains can break and thus shorten. Shorter molecular chain touches and connects to fair other molecules, thus your material gets weaker. OFC, this issue can be circumvented by grading plastic, and designing the arts for appropriate strength. And when it becomes really useless, you can still reprocess it chemically. Technological issues are, in some sense, easier to overcome than legislative ones, as it can be done by a relatively small hard-working group. With legislative problems you have to fight against large multinationals and various other interests groups pushing back with all their bribing might lobby power. One way to think of plastic is like a weave of long fibers similar to a cloth, but much smaller. When it's originally made it's quite strong because those fibers are so long and tangled together. Every time it gets recycled those fibers get pulled apart and many get broken into smaller and smaller pieces. Eventually those pieces of the original fibers are too small to weave together to hold a structure anymore, and we don't have great methods for decomposing them back into the original components to make fresh new plastic fibers or an eco-friendly byproduct.